Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Let's skip the long intro, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Okay, so here we go. You could say this is part 2 of the last upload. And I'm recording this now without even having checked the comments or any feedback from the first one. But in part 2, I'm going to clarify something. This is not because I hate Amira. That's not it. And I'm saying her name. It is because, frankly, I'm supposed to take issue with anyone that sides with the enemy against us, especially if we have a common enemy and they side with that enemy against us. Because this is where the colorism crybabies might be right about something. In the States, the colorism that we've experienced and the racism that we've experienced follow global patterns on occasion. But the colorism, not so much. The colorism is unique in America because it's actually been going the other way. Now, I was led to believe that even in the United States, colorism only went one way, that it was always seen and accepted as better to be lighter overwhelmingly, and there was never any pushback until recently. And I mean, if you would ask me, there was never any pushback until 1989. If you had asked me for many years up until about 2018, when I began to see that, there was. And I give credit to a non-black man and light-skinned motivation, even though I don't like them and they don't like me. I give credit because they brought the historical receipts to show this. And since they brought historical receipts, I gave them credit to their faces. And I said, I will take this. And I updated my opinions after I looked into it some more. And even all I had to do was look into my own life. And truth be told, my parents had told me some things that I thought were unique to my area. Maybe I didn't remember these things. They told me some things that had happened before I was 5, when I had very little memory. One incident I do remember, but I wasn't at the table when the adults had this conversation with my parents about me, and how easily I was playing with other black children regardless of their shade. Like, they were shocked about this. I wasn't at the table because I was off with the kids playing. I remember this because my baby brother had not yet been born. I was still an only child. But I never heard anything about this until 2017. So by 2020, when I began to hear the receipts they were bringing, I said, okay, well, you brought receipts. I'll update my opinion. When MC Chan sent me a link explaining that even the Khoi and the San had European ancestry, and that genes for light skin did come out from outside of Africa, which was dated 2014, I updated my opinion. Okay, you know what? But then J. Lion Menelik sent something to me that I had just read a few minutes before he sent it to me, which was from 2017. And Kirigakure Jones had also found something from 2017. So the links that they sent required me to update, because those links actually referred to the 2014 study. But it was an update that showed that there were, in fact, genes for skin color, or rather alleles for skin color, that coded for dark skin and light skin, and that these were genes that were older actually than the human species. That means they could be found even in some non-humans, coding for both light and dark skin. And everybody's pretty sure that human beings got started in Africa. That's all we can find at this point. Now, where Adam landed, I don't know. I've heard speculation. But as far as the species goes, it's pretty much assumed that we got started in Africa and spread out from there. So then I had to update my opinion again. Okay, so if you're black and light-skinned, or you're a black admixture and light-skinned, then it's going to take a DNA test to even know which gene you have if you don't have both. Now, of course, in the Americas, it's safe to assume that it's from admixture. But in the continent, let's say, you probably have to get a DNA test done. In the Americas, you can't prove that you don't have either one till you get a DNA test done. You see? So I had to update my opinion again. Now, in these cases, it was easy because Kitagakure Jones and I, we cool, we straight. J. Line Menelik and I straight. MC Chan and I straight. Matter of fact, he's Muslim, and shout out to all of y'all. Assalamu alaikum, MC Chan. So it was easy to update my opinion based on the evidence that they each sent. They each sent what they had. I just looked at what was the most recent, and so I even when I didn't like a non-black man and light-skinned motivation because of how they were towards me, I was still willing to admit this. And this is because this is the stand that I have to follow as a Muslim who knows about this. Now, I will say this about biases and not wanting to take somebody's word for something. It is very true that when you get used to accepting valid info or solid evidence from people, even when you don't like them or just don't know them, it gets easier to do this over time. So that bias that we all will have naturally actually begins to wither, weaken, if not go away. I'll say that. You try it, you get better at it. You do anything enough times, you get better at it. I got students who've been playing stupid with their teacher for so many years that by the time they get to me, they're just outright dumb. They weren't born this way, but they've trained themselves to be this way. It's just how that works. Now, this being said, I want to give some credit to Sergeant Willie Pete. I don't think he likes or hates me one way or another. We don't know each other, but he's always been fair to me. And he brought the receipts to show that, yeah, white supremacy and racism are things, and they do have lasting impacts up until today. They've been legally sanctioned by the U.S. government, state governments, and non-governmental organizations all the way up to the 60s. And that we're dealing with the legacy of this, and that no, the black community is not impoverished because we're black or because we got bad habits per se. The black community is dysfunctional because of our bad habits. That is true. But the impoverishment, well, that's policy. That is the case. And when we do build and get ahead, they come burn it down, and I think they would do it again. The reason I think so is because Sergeant Willie Pete brought up, he gave us things to look, that we could look up, and I just wanted to be fair. And say, you know what, I taught history. These things actually were in the history textbooks. These are things that the Wyatts wrote about themselves in the history textbooks. Don't say that it's because the left took over. No, the left and the right are still butting heads about this stuff. Neither one has really ever taken over. Texas wanted to write history out, they wanted to write slavery out of its own history textbooks. Do you think that the left wanted that? No, the left and the right are two wings of the same bird. I've been saying this for decades. So when I get on Muslims who normalize the Wyatts and want to look down on us, don't say a further-mucking thing to me. Executive Interiors LLC, as an example. I'm going to question her faith. I didn't call her a disbeliever yet, but I'm going to question her faith until she has the moral fortitude. And I'm going to do the same thing to any other Muslim, even if they're black, until the day they have the moral fortitude to admit that the oppressor is the moral inferior of the victim. I doubt their faith. And if they try to justify oppression, then they are disbelievers. Outright disbelievers at that point. Because we're not allowed to change the definition of what is right and what is wrong. If Allah forbade something in our faith, we're not allowed to turn around and make it permissible or try to justify it unless someone was compelled somehow. And we're not allowed to turn around and outlaw things that Allah has allowed us. Unless, of course, we find out that it is harmful, which would make it somehow outlawed anyway, because of what we know about it. These are the rules we have. These were laid down. This is not dependent upon how I feel. These rules were there long before I was born. And they'll be here long after I'm gone. So my own feelings do not necessarily matter in this. If I turn around and I justify the oppression of the oppressor, and blame the victim for the oppression, I have lost my faith. Because I've lost the very moral compass that God gave us. Scholars know about this. A lot of times they don't want to talk about it when it comes to race because many scholars aren't ready to admit black was right, white was wrong when it comes to the racial conflict. We did wrong things. So too have the Wyatts. But in the racial conflict, black was right, white was wrong. End of story. And as a matter of fact, it was not one single African nation, North African or tropical African, that went in and colonized the Levant or the Levant. Lebanon and Syria were not colonized by any African nation. They were colonized by France. Jordan and Iraq and the Gulf states were colonized by England. So too were Sudan and Egypt and other large swaths of Africa and the Caribbean and the South Pacific Islands and Malaysia, Hong Kong, parts of China at different points, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. These are former British colonies. And even a chunk of South America called Guyana. So the common enemy did this. So you further mucking right, I'm going to jump on somebody that sits up and starts spouting all the right-wing rhetoric and then says, well, blacks are more racist than whites. No, the hell we're not. Now, Amira may not know this, but she should if she listened to anything I said before. Not just her, any other Middle Easterner that ever listened to anything I said before should by now know that black folks have decided to turn this Arab antipathy towards black people into a mutual grudge. And that's something we have every further mucking right to do. Not because the Arabs have come and done the same thing that the Wyatts have done. No, some people even like to say, well, they had their slave trade. It's older than the European slave trade. Got doubts about how brutal it was, but for the most part, Arabs today don't have a concept of racial violence. Violence based on race is not necessarily a concept of theirs. Based on status, maybe so. You know, you could get away with doing something to someone because they're from a poor country. They kind of have that concept, but they don't even think that that's necessarily okay. They just understand that if someone's angry and they have a choice between taking it out on someone from Bangladesh with its poverty or taking it out on somebody from England with its wealth, they're probably going to jump on the Bangladeshi. That's true, but that has to do with wealth. Doesn't have to do with race. However, the fact that Bangladesh is an impoverished nation and England is not has to do with white supremacy. That's a long topic. All I'm simply saying is I'm going to jump on any Muslim, Middle Eastern or not, that sides with the oppressor against the victim. And to some of you right-wing niggas, I said it, to you all that like to say, man, why you always use the term victim? Nigga, because we were. Everybody was when it came to dealing with the Western European Wyatts. Even Eastern Europeans were victims of them. Being a victim does not make you guilty. Being a professional victim is a problem. And that's why I jump on these colorism crybabies. But when their points are valid, they're valid. And on a global scale, they are right about one thing, and that is that colorism and white racism globally have followed a white supremacist model. White on top, black on bottom, by virtue of the colors alone, everybody else somewhere in between. They didn't make up that part. They made up or exaggerated what was going on in the States. And sometimes exaggerated even what's going on back home, like in Africa, for instance. Depending on which part. I'll never forget, it was 1999, 98. A friend of mine from Ethiopia told me, this is a long time ago, and he had just landed in Atlanta from Ethiopia. But I met him through mutual friends, and I remember him, a guy named Dawit, nice guy. Man said to me, I asked him about colorism in a nutshell, like, you know, do people have a problem with darker skinned folks in your country? And he said, no. I mean, people say that, but no, we got a problem with country people that live out in the exterior in the borderlands. Some of them are quite dark. Some of them are pale. It depends on which border. But this idea of having a problem with someone because they're dark, no, not really. He said, actually, I take that back. Women do make a big deal out of this. Guess what I found out from the lady I love dearly, my wife. She said the same thing about her country next door. That oftentimes the ladies, they may make a big deal about shade. And the funny thing is they prefer to be pale and they prefer their men to be dark, but they don't prefer lighter men. But there's no idea that a paler skinned man can't find someone to marry because he's pale. Or that a darker skinned woman would never find someone to marry because she's dark. That idea does not go. And it's only something that the ladies make a big deal out. To the dudes, it's not that big a deal. Unless, of course, they get angry. Then, yeah, they'll say anything about whatever shade you have because they'll roast each other in their culture no matter what. That's just how they are. It's more so about roasting than it is really about a preference for one shade over another. And I even get on some of them about that. I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you straight up, the minute you say something that shows you have a preference for white over black, we fighting. Because I'm going to call you out your faith. I'm going to doubt your faith. Maybe you're still Muslim, maybe not. How do I know? Now, the correct answer to that is, well, if I have these biases, I still admit that they're wrong. That's the correct answer to how do I know that you're still a Muslim. The minute someone starts to try to justify these biases, we're done. Also, you think white is okay, right, normal, some kind of standard, and black is problematic. You going to pathologize blackness while you normalize whiteness, or pathologize otherness while you normalize the Wyatts? Okay, see, now what you're saying is the oppressor is superior. That's a moral issue, and that's not acceptable in Islam. So I'm coming from what I've actually learned about the religion when I do this. Y'all can back the up off me. Because the minute you start trying to justify this, I doubt your faith. You come to me with stuff that's too far left, outside of the bounds of what's revealed and acceptable, I got doubts about your faith. So why am I going to make an exception for the right? Don't you know that those right-wingers that talk these points and started these talking points are the same ones that say, never forget 9/11, but tell us to forget about slavery? They are hypocrites for doing that. You follow them, you will become one. You are just like the ones who go too far left. Those that call themselves Muslims and then turn around and go too far left, you're just like them. The hadith says that people of our ummah would follow anybody else into a lizard hole even if they crawled into it. They practice incest, we would turn around and do the same thing. The ones that follow them too far into the left, they're just like you. And you're just like them. You follow them too far off center. We are the middle balanced nation. That's us. You follow either one too far gone, you give up your faith. Now that we got this out the way, I'm going to say this because one of you, Executive Interiors LLC, decided to sit up and say to me that I was just mad because Amira would not talk about colorism. I'm not going to ask her to talk about specifically African American or African continental or African Caribbean colorism. I'm not going to ask her to specifically talk about that. She may not know its nuances, and that's not her fault. But if she's going to have a further-mucking thing to say, it needs to be to her own people, the Lebanese nationally and the Arabs linguistically, about their colorism, which does follow the global model, about which the colorism crybabies justly are upset, if they care at all, if they're not just crying alligator and crocodile tears. Because I do find that to be blasphemous and offensive. And why do I say that? Because non-black Arabs and Arab adjacent people, even the religious ones, will try to use religion to justify their colorism. Shuck that fit. Even if their colorism only extends to marriage, even if that's the case, they still are wrong for trying to use the religion to justify this colorism. Sitting up here saying that the Hur al-Ain in paradise must be pale skinned because they're like pearls. Pearls come in 4 colors naturally. One of them is black. Another one is dark blue or purple. I guess they're the same. They come in white and gray. Those are the 4 colors together. So this likening them unto pearls probably has a lot less to do with the individual shades than it has to do with the fact that they're the same shade all over. That's really one of the things that people naturally look for in someone, the same shade everywhere. That's really what we like to see. And that's natural. I'm not going to go too far into that anymore. I will say that in the next upload, I'm going to actually touch on colorism again. And I'm going to explain an answer to somebody's question regarding it. And I'm actually going to trace one phenomena and its effects on another phenomena. So for this upload, thank you all for listening. Now you understand why I say in one hand, Salam Alaikum, and then turn around and say black heterosexual non-select male power because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction of judgment day. Now you know why I'll say both of them in the same outro. Black heart, black mind, black out.